which exists has a presence in about 35 countries. And I've been the international president for 23 years. And then I handed over the leadership in August last year. I am currently a moderator of the Churches Commission on International Affairs of the WCC, which has got all the churches represented, including observers from the Catholic Church and evangelical alliances. And we deal with the conflict situations in the world generally, and that's our responsibility. But otherwise, I serve in boards and other activities.
Thank you, Reverend. Reverend, if I may ask, is it possible that you could just raise your voice a little?
Oh, yeah.
As you can see, we have various TV and radio personnel here, and plus we've been advised that those at the back of the gallery are struggling to hear. Thank you. And while we're on your personal history, perhaps we can now dig into some more detail, looking at your personal background and your political career. Perhaps we can start by dealing with when you were born and where you were raised.
I was born on the 3rd of January 1951. I do say in my I was born in Soweto, but I've worked it out that I was born in Bushbuckridge. But during those days, they had to move. If you were pregnant, you had to move and be born in the right place so that you can have the right ID and be able to work in the right place. And so I don't think they were able to. I can't show that my mother was in Johannesburg on that day. But indeed, my records would say I was born in Johannesburg. I went to school in Soweto, ended up at the University of the North during that time. I couldn't go to vets because I wanted to do, I was in the field of maths, applied mathematics, and I wanted to do medicine, but I was told the University of the North has maths, so that's where black children go to. So I ended up in the University of the North. We, of course, sent home a number of times during my time as a student because of protests and action. The last year of 1974, I went there 1972. The last year, 1974, we then celebrated the Frelimo rally. We had a Frelimo rally, celebrated the freedom of Mozambique. And those rallies were banned just hours before they happened. And we met as students, and the police came and told us we were breaking the law. We left the hall singing freedom songs, and then they charged on us, and lots of students got injured. And we ended up with a Snyman Commission to look at that unrest at the university. What is important about it is that almost half of the student representative council either went into exile, went underground, and therefore the student representative council was not operational. I then was elected as a student aid welfare type of organization to take care of the students, and I spent time doing that. And by the time the commission came, I was the chair of that committee and had to represent the students at the commission. After that, in January, I was advised by one of my lecturers there that you shouldn't come back to this university, otherwise you'll end up in jail. And that's how I stopped going to University of the North. I came back home, worked at the Nuclear Physics Research Unit at Wits, because that was my field of work. We left there about 1979 because we were 3 black workers in that laboratory. And having read more and investigation about development of nuclear weapons in the country, we felt we should leave because we are contributing into something that might destroy us. And so that's how I left the Nuclear Physics Research Unit. I became a pastor of my church in Kagiso Krugersdorp, and that's where I was detained a number of times, maybe come back to that part of it, and tortured severely, and then returned to Soweto after my church had suspended me, and I ended up...
Before we get to the history dealing with your arrests and detention, let's just finish up on aspects of your educational and political career. So you indicate, Reverend, in your affidavit that because of the political turmoil and your involvement in student activism, you had to abandon your university education, at least at Turfloop.
At that point, yeah.
But did you register then at University of South Africa, UNISA?
Yeah, during those days, I actually don't know what the reasons were, but we were advised if you leave the university the way I left, you don't apply to UNISA until after 2 years. Otherwise, you will not be accepted. Now, I've never established the facts about it, but I delayed that. So I did my theological training diploma with the church during that time, which I qualified because I was doing it by correspondence by 1979, and I was ordained in 1980 as a pastor. But in the meantime, I did register with UNISA those 2 years later for a BSc degree, which was the degree I was doing at Turfloop. And all the time we had to write exams. There's a state of emergency, or you are in detention, or so I never was able to finish that degree. I registered for a theology degree with UNISA, thinking that might do better. But when I was supposed to write the final exams in 1986, I think, they declared a state of emergency. We used the language. Some of us were in the treason trial in 85. Were due to be arrested in 6 months' time again. And we thought it doesn't make sense. So we went underground. So I was underground for about 11 months. 5 of it was outside the country. And I left hoping I could write the examination outside the country. And UNISA told me I can only write it at the embassy of South Africa, which meant I would go to jail anyway. So I never wrote that exam. So in a sense, there was disruption in my life for those years. Later, I did further studies and have a master's in religious studies and a master's in public administration, University of Natal and Harvard University. So that's where I would be in terms of the academic processes. Yeah.
Thank you, Reverend. And perhaps just to complete the story and the picture of your life, can you indicate to the court the balance of your political career? In other words, post getting these degrees, what positions did you occupy up until the present day?
Yeah. all of it ran parallel in terms of my work. I returned from Teflog, taught at the Naleji High School in Soweto, but it could only last for 3 months, and the security police began to visit the principal. I was a private teacher, so they said they can't have me there because I'll influence the students. And in that class, there were students who became leaders during 1977. And then after that, I worked with Christ for All Nations. That's an evangelistic entity within the church for 1 year. Worked for a short while with my church for another year as an evangelist, and then ended up with the University of Witwatersrand in terms of the research I was doing at the Nuclear Physics Research Unit. Then I became director of self-help project in Kagiso to help people who were victims of apartheid. But in terms of my political engagement, when I arrived at Kagiso as a pastor, normally I go and visit leaders. And in Kagiso, the Pan-African Congress was more dominant during those days. And so I went to visit every leader who was there. And 6 months later, as a pastor, all of those leaders I visited were in detention. And so I had a pastoral responsibility to visit the families and assisted them to get lawyers to inquire about the whereabouts of their family members because they were detained under Section 6 incommunicado. And I think the mistake of the lawyers was to say, we are instructed by Reverend Frank Chikanetestifying to inquire about so-and-so, which then attracted the attention of the police on me. Within 6 months, they detained me.
Reverend, we're going to be dealing in some detail with your experiences with the police and the security branch in particular.
Yeah.
But can we just give a court just brief highlights of your career? So, for example, you were the head of the South African Council of Churches for some time.
Yeah.
We know that you played a role in the presidency, and then we'll return to the detail with the police.
I was pastor of the congregation in Krugersdorp, Kagiso, for about 5.5 years. And at the end of that 5.5 years, that's when my church accused me of being involved in politics and then suspended me. After my suspension, I worked for the Institute for Contextual Theology for another 5.5 years or so, which was dealing with different theological traditions, particularly liberation theologies around the world. And after the Institute for Contextual Theology, I was appointed General Secretary of the Council of Churches from 1987 to 94. And it was during the worst moments in our country in terms of resistance, violence, detention of people, which I had to deal with as General Secretary of the Council of Churches. Then I was appointed as a member of the Electoral Commission in 1993, whilst I was General Secretary of the Council. So I was part of the Electoral Commission that took care of the first democratic elections in the country. And afterwards, I retired from the SACC. Couldn't be part of the government because I was in the Electoral Commission. So I went to study. That's where I did my master's in public management and administration. And after that, I returned, did a short time at University of Cape Town as a researcher, and was then appointed as an advisor to Deputy President Mbeki. At that time, became later Director General, and then Deputy Secretary of Cabinet during Mandela's presidency. And when Becky became president, I became Director General and Secretary of the Cabinet. And that took us to 2009.
Thank you, Reverend. And perhaps I'll just highlight one event in your history which I think is worth recalling. Was there an attempt on your life by the security branch? Do you recall?
Besides the detentions, torture, and what happened there, later, about 1988, I think, 1989.
That's right.
Yes. I was banned from entering Namibia. I'm not sure whether I was the only one who was banned from entering Namibia. I was invited to go to Namibia to assist them with the crisis there as General Secretary of the Council. And I was given an order at the airport to stop me from going to Namibia. When the United Nations took over responsibility based on Resolution 435, I then thought, well, I can now go and help them because the regime that banned me is no more in charge. But that's when the poisoning story happened. Unfortunately, we now have evidence in court. The people who did it confessed. It's the former Minister of Police, the Minister Flock, Commissioner van der Merwe, and three policemen who executed the operation. And so they put the chemical weapon stuff into my clothes, which would rub against me. And I had a horror experience about that in Namibia when I was there. I think the plan was they knew I would travel to the north of Namibia in the morning the following day, and I would have died in the north where there's no help. Unfortunately, we delayed, and it hit me halfway, and there was a hospital there where they took care of me. To shorten the story is that I was brought back to Johannesburg, flown back for treatment, but they couldn't work it out. I went to then join my wife in Wisconsin because we had an appointment with President Bush as church leaders. And then I got attacked again there, and 3 times by that chemical, and it took those doctors seeing me 3 times to work out what it was. And I survived that. But the scientists who produced the chemicals came to ask for forgiveness from me because they were producing the stuff in the laboratory which was being used against political activists. The police responsibility was to deal with those who were inside the country, and the military dealing with those who are outside the country. And the order was from the President, the National Security Council. Now what I'm talking about now is in the records of the court because they made confessions about all that. I always call myself a miracle because those scientists said to me, you should have died. But I survived.
Thank you, Reverend. And just for the court's record, it was in 2007 that former Minister Adrian Flock, former Commissioner of Police Johannes van der Merwe, and then I believe it was about 3 senior security branch officers. There was an Otter, somebody by the name of Otter, another officer by the name of Smith. I can't recall the others, but they pleaded guilty to attempted murder, and they were given a suspended sentence by way of a plea bargain. Why did you think that the security branch wanted to murder you when you were not involved in the armed resistance per se? You were a pastor, and you were involved in peaceful resistance. Why do you think the police wanted to kill you?
They partly gave the reasons, but I can explain it from my perspective that I think what happened in the country is that besides the ANC and the PAC Communist Party being banned, there was resistance in the country. I was part of the leadership of the United Democratic Front between 1983 and 1985. It was during the time when I was suspended from my church, so I could do that. And we created a situation in the country which they called a condition of ungovernability. Basically, what we were mobilizing the oppressed was don't cooperate with the apartheid system. We're still paying for that because people are refusing to pay services now. But we refuse to pay anything or have a relationship with the apartheid system, including bonds which came through the administration. There used to be West-Rand administration which managed bonds for black housing in Soweto. We even boycotted that.
Thank you, Reverend. I think you've given the court a good idea of the non-violent threat that you posed to the apartheid regime at that time.
Can I just clarify? One of the witnesses, I'm not sure whether it was Ms. Hogan or mentioned that Van der Merwe. Now, Reverend Chikanetestifying mentioned Van der Merwe in this poisoning story. Is it the same Van der Merwe?
My Lord, we'll double check, but I don't believe that they are the same officers. They're different Van der Merwes.
This Van der Merwe was the National Commissioner of Police. So
he was at that time he was the Commissioner of Police, and previously he had been himself the head of the security branch.
Well, someone like the people came to wash your feet.
Yes, it's the former Minister Flock.
Oh,
yeah.
He was in charge of the three.
At the point when he was minister, the commissioner was in charge and the three policemen. I think what Mr. Flock said to me was, because we were investigating these three policemen, I was Director General, and we were beginning to crack the code. They used their names to put them together as if it's a name of one person, and we thought we were looking for one person, and we found out it's three people. And once we cracked that, that's when Mr. Flock came to me and said to me he wants to talk to me. Firstly, he would like to ask for forgiveness about what he did. Secondly, that he would not, in good conscience, allow his foot soldiers to be charged and tried without him. And I thought it was a respectable thing to do. And he came with the National Commissioner another day to vouch that they will, I think they wanted an arrangement, pre-bargaining arrangement that would not bring those policemen into court. And I said it's not possible to do that. So, in essence, Flock was responsible for the operation, or the operators at that time.
I can advise you, Reverend, that I'm personally aware of the fact that both, in fact, all the convicted in that case, from Minister Flock and Commissioner Van der Merwe down to the security branch officers, originally sought leniency from the then National Director of Public Prosecutions, Lucy Picoli, who decided to pursue the prosecution because they were refusing to disclose other crimes that they had been involved in. And then subsequent to that, they then applied for a pardon through President Mbeki's special dispensation of political pardons. And various organizations opposed their pardon on the basis that they were refusing to disclose other actions they had taken against various other targets. There was, in fact, they did accept that there was a list, a so-called hit list. They weren't willing to disclose who else was on that list and what action was taken.
I think part of the challenge was that I wanted information about me in particular, and I wasn't prepared that we do plea bargaining without them giving the information, which they ended up doing because they would have been charged in any way. But my pain about it is that I happen to be the person who's known to have been poisoned by them. But if you go to the order for chemicals that is in the records of the court, there are other orders over a period of about 2-3 years, I think, used against other people. And nobody up to now knows who they were used against. And I thought the court would have dealt with the issue about what happened to that chemical, what happened to that chemical. And when they matched the chemical they ordered for me with the laboratory outcomes in the United States where I was in the hospital, they matched. And nobody has pursued it. There are those who were attacked outside. I know somebody in the Netherlands. She's been trying to find out. Many would have died. And so if you're dead, nobody would have known. If I died in the first attack, nobody would have known what happened. So that was the struggle at that time to say, at least tell me what happened about me. That's where the reasons come in. Firstly, it's that they could detain me before. Now that I'm General Secretary of the Council of Churches, it was not possible for them to detain me. So they had to use what you would call extrajudicial methods to deal with me. I think that's where what qualified me to be attacked. The other thing is that after banning all the organizations, that's what the point I was making, they then restricted trade unions and other organizations during the time I was General Secretary. So even the neighbors, the leadership in the neighborhood, when I visited the countries, would say the only voice they had during those days was my voice, which is the General Secretary of the Council, because everybody was restricted, couldn't call for a stay away. It was illegal to announce somebody is detained. And we had to use the churches during prayer sessions across the country to announce that we are praying for so-and-so who's in detention. That was the only way in which the families would know, because it was illegal to make that announcement. So we did quite some things that were meant to help the victims of the apartheid system to survive under those conditions. And then Hotso House, I was saying, through the United Democratic Front, they were saying we created conditions of ungovernability. And then 1987, I became General Secretary. Hotso House became the center of activity. And when Bishop Buthelezi, who is late now, had to give evidence in one of the cases, they accused the Council of Churches in that case as operating like an alternative government, which means we were taking care of the detainees, we were taking care of prisoners, we were taking care of families. We even had Cowley House in Cape Town where people who visited prisoners in Robben Island, we would fly them there, get money to pay for it. They would wait in Cowley House be fed there until they are called to go to the Robben Island. It was all council of churches operating. We did the defense for political prisoners, raised money to do that. So they then said we are acting like an alternative government. And the last thing I would like to say is that what appears in the court records of those policemen, Flop and Van der Merwe, is that the main issue that made me to attack me was that we're campaigning for comprehensive sanctions against South Africa. And we had an international delegation that went to 7 of the G7 countries to ask that they apply sanctions against the apartheid government, will take care of the people. And that is in the court records, that is the sanction campaign that they had to take.
Thank you, Reverend. That's enormously helpful insights. And certainly, I think the point has to be made that there are a large number of families, an unknown number of families, waiting to hear the truth as to how their loved ones perished. And it is important that that truth be uncovered. Now, if I may take you back to the late 1970s, and here we're now going to be dealing with your various arrests and detentions. And this will be from paragraph 10 onwards in your affidavit. You indicated that your first arrest and detention by the security branch was for 7 days, and that was late January, early February 1977. But then later, in 1977, you were detained for an extensive period, you say, from 6th of June 1977 and until January 1978. And it appears that much happened during that detention, including considerable abuse. Can you describe that detention to the court?
Yeah. Actually, I've written about this in my book, No Life of My Own. And I always say that those first 2 detentions were the worst of what I experienced. I mean, the first detention, 7 days at John Foster Square. They were looking for my brother and young people from my congregation. Actually, they detained every young person they could find from during that time. And when I noticed, they came to Krugersdorp to search the church. Even went to the baptismal pond because they were looking for arms. And they found nothing, but threatened to detain me. I went to the car with them. Then I found that one of the members of our church in Soweto and the mother and family the father and family, mother of the family I know were detained. And I knew the 2 other boys were on the run. And the oldest child would be 15 years, who was remaining in the house. So I decided to go there, to go and check the kids. When I arrived there 7 o'clock in the morning, they left 5 o'clock at my home. They welcomed me. They set up an ambush, welcomed me there and said, well, I'm under their control now. And sitting in that dining room, I thought it's important to explain this because it was quite traumatic. Sitting there, I'm coming to take care of the children, make sure they are taken care of as a pastor. There was a young man there who was bleeding profusely, who was a friend of my younger brother, who was assaulted so badly. And the security police were all over. And the 15-year-old was screaming in the bedroom, being tortured.
She was being tortured?
Yeah, she was being tortured in the bedroom, screaming. And when, after this detention, then I got to know that they took her to the bushes in Merafi Station. They are next to the Merafi Station in Soweto. and went and subjected her to electric shocks to get her to tell them where the brothers are. So it was a huge operation. And when I said, well, if I can't help this child, can I leave? And there's a son's sons. He appeared in the Timor case. He was in charge of that operation.
Seth's sons.
Yeah, sons. He was in charge of that operation, and he told me, well, we'll tell you when to stand up there. And that was the beginning of my detention, and we were tortured thoroughly at John Foster. I say that that's the detention where they use third-degree methods, which means there are no rules. They trampled on me, did everything they could do. About 3 people died during that detention. One of them was Malele, I think. In the Biko chart for people who died in detention, you can see the names of the people in that chart. We were so tortured that when they released me 7 days later, I was completely disorientated. I couldn't even say where home was. They had to take me home. And it took time to recover from that. In the second detention...
Reverend, before we move to the second detention,
yeah.
Do you recall the identities or the names of the security branch officers involved in your torture in those 7 days?
Yeah, the 7 days, I wouldn't remember. It was so rough. I mean, you had 10 security police on top of you. You can't even identify them. The second torture was the one where you can actually identify people, because it took 6 weeks of torture. This one was 7 days.
It was short. But you did mention Seth's sons. Was Seth's sons involved in the torture during those 7 days?
Well, he was around, but I can't remember. If you had 10 people on top of you, I wouldn't say he was there, but he was around the activity, because I couldn't forget him. I mean, he detained me. I sat in that house for a few hours before we left, because they were waiting to ambush these 2 boys, which they never got, and they ended up in exile.
Thank you. Well, then let's move to the second period of detention, which you say began from the 6th of June 1977 at Krugersdorp Police Station.
Yeah. I was detained 6th January, June. And it had to do with the case of the detained leaders in Kagiso, who ended up in the Bethal trial during those days. They believed, I don't know, but firstly that I couldn't help them if I don't know what they've done. So I must tell them about, what they were doing, which was asking for too much. Secondly, somebody had been tortured and told them my car was used to take people to the border, which was also false. The only thing that happened with my car is that one of those detainees, the leaders, had a workshop fixing cars, so I had just taken my car to get fixed, that's all. But that was translated to taking people to outside the country. The witness, by the way, did say it was false. He was forced to make that statement. I went through 6 weeks of torture, and I would say every method that you could think of, direct assault, chaining me in concocted positions, like chain you against your feet and against a chair, and for many hours you stay in that position. When they take you out of that position, you can walk. They hanged me head down until I lost consciousness.
Hanged you.
Yeah, they put me on a broom, hanged me with my head facing down, and until I lost consciousness. So I don't know how long that lasted. And by the time I gained consciousness, it's when they were taking me back to the cell. They made me stand for 48 hours to 50, I would explain that, on a set of bricks, at times chained against the heater in the interrogation hall room. They changed shifts, 8 hours per shift, and kept me awake for 48 hours, interrogating me, beating me up. And there were screams in the other 3 interrogation rooms. And at one stage, I remember engaging the police because there was a woman who was really screaming. And I said to them, I mean, really, you can't sit here in a good conscience listening to that scream. I'm being tortured, but the scream was just unbearable. How would you allow this type of thing to happen? Well, we are not in charge. We're just doing our job. And this is the place where I write about the deacon of my church supervising that torture, a white deacon of my church. And I had visited that church during normal days, of my work. And I engaged him, and he said, no, I'm just doing my job. I'm doing my job. And he would leave me there, come back to his shift, find me there. And they interrogated me for 48 hours. And at the point of 48 hours, I stopped answering their questions. I told them, I'm not okay. I'm not normal. So I can't answer your questions because anything you get now will not make sense. And I refused to talk to them for 2 hours. And then they unchained me, put me on leg irons, drove me to Rustenburg prison, and dumped me there until the following year. So that was a whole six weeks, I think. I will have to check the record in the book. It's more reliable because I wrote whilst my mind was very fresh, and then dumped me there. When I arrived there, that's important because I couldn't walk, struggled to walk, and I demanded to see a doctor. They took me to the doctor. Doctor examined me, my feet were swollen, and he said to them, take him to the cell, he will be okay. And that's it. And there was no medical attention, nothing. I had to recover on my own in that cell. So it's one of the, I would say, the 7 days were third-degree methods. There were no rules there. This one was slow process of torture to make sure they get what they want, which didn't make sense because I didn't have it.
So you say the deacon was in your church in Soweto?
No, in the white church.
Oh.
Yeah, the AFM in the white, in Krumazov. We had visited there on mission days, we meet, but I wouldn't have known him. He introduced himself as
a police officer. He was
a police officer, a security police officer. He introduced himself to me as a deacon of my church, but explained he's doing his job. I looked for him after '94 as well, and I was told he ended up in Free State, and I've not been able to reach him because I wanted to make peace with all of them. I mean, the things that happened were terrible. I don't think he's alive now because he was a bit older than me.
he was a full-time security branch officer,
Yeah.
then also volunteered at his church as a deacon.
Yeah, because lay people become deacons in the church. It could be any person who works anywhere. Yeah,
Do you recall his name, perchance?
Yeah, I had his name. I tried to remember now. At the time I was looking for him, I had his name, but I can't find it in any of the records. But you see, it was because he was a deacon of my church, I was saying to that church, can you help me find this man? Let's make peace. I mean, he doesn't have to run away from me because I'm not intending to send him to jail. We just have to make peace because we meet again. Let me make an example. When one guest visited South Africa, the police have to take care of these guests. And then there I was as Director General in the presidency, meets this leader, and there my torturer was taking care of this leader, so we greeted each other. And I thought, why don't we make peace? We'll meet all over, because they are still in the state machinery, at least the first few years after 94. Yeah, and then the last thing about that torture is that they used to take us out, and they would walk with you in a road, going from one point to another, and they would say, walk in front so we can see you. I then said, no, I will not walk in front. I will walk next to you. Because if I walked in front, you would shoot me and say I was running away. So I'm not going to do that. So there was a lot of engagement with the guys who were torturing me. You reach a stage, 3 weeks, I don't remember whether it's 3 weeks or 6 weeks, but we'll check that. But even 3 weeks, it's a long time with a torturer you create a relationship.
So Reverend, you were then released in January 1978.
Yeah.
And it appears that, in fact, you were then charged with public violence.
Yeah, instead of being charged with the people they were questioning me about, they then charged me with the group of detainees we were with for public violence. I must add, which is not in my statement, that when they brought us together in January, because we were dispersed all over, we were put in one cell. I didn't even know some of those young people were there. But one of them had completely lost it. It was totally abnormal. And he never recovered. But I can't track down the name, so I'm not able to do that. So they then charged us for public violence, released us. I think we were going to come back in a week or so's time. I don't remember the time frames. On the day when I was supposed to go to court, they came and detained me. It was in the men's, the mission house, the church. I'm a pastor, so I stayed in the church house in Kagiso. They detained me there. They started beating me up from the bedroom. And I was living with, because I was not married at that time, I lived with a couple in the building. And the Isaac Genu, who was the one of the couple husband, came to try to help and ask what's happening. They sent him back with a gun to go and sleep, so that he shouldn't see what's happening. So they beat me up from the house into the cars. They took me to Kagiso police station. And, those days we had Afro hair. It was the black consciousness heydays of Afro hair, etc. They pulled out my hair in the police station. It got scattered all over the police station, and they forced me to collect my hair and put it in a dustbin. and then drove me to Bethel, which is where the case ended up being held. But I don't know why they drove me there, because I should appear in court at 10. Yeah, Kurazov. So they assaulted me throughout as we were going to Bethel, and arrived there. I think their commander said, "Go back to Krugersdorp. The case is waiting for you." So they drove me back to Krugersdorp at 2 o'clock. And when they detained me, they didn't allow me to put my clothes on. So I had my clothes in my hands and pajamas. So I was able to dress up as we're going back in the car on top of my pajamas. And when I appeared in court, the congregation was full in court waiting. And I appeared there with my jacket on top of the pajamas. And then the case was thrown out. There was no case. And then we went home. And that radicalized that congregation so much that some of the young people ended up in exile, some of them ended up with controversies because they were so angry about what happened there. After my release, I couldn't sleep in one place for 2 nights. Because, if you are detained for so long, they detain you a few days later, torture you so much. I couldn't sleep in one place for 2 days. So my friends had to move me from one house to another. I couldn't go and sleep at the church either. And it took a long time before I could go back and stay at the church.
Reverend, there has been a request from the back of the courtroom that you elevate your voice again. They're very interested in hearing what you have to say.
I'll do the preaching voice then.
Exactly.
That's what I'm waiting for.
Perhaps if you can pretend that we're actually in a large cathedral and your voice has to boom. You mentioned in your affidavit at paragraph 16 that you had a brief detention in 1980 and you were not interrogated.
Yeah, that's the time when Krugersdorp was going to give P.W. Botha the freedom of Krugersdorp, of Krugersdorp. And for them to do that, they had to detain all the leaders in Kagiso and Mansonville. So they detained us before the celebration, didn't ask us any questions, nothing. And the celebration went past, and then they released us afterwards, which means they couldn't have their celebration whilst we were there. Obviously, they knew we would protest against it. And our view was, why give P.W. Botha freedom of Krugersdorp when we are not free in our country? It doesn't make sense. We need to be free. And that's what we're struggling for.
And you then go on to say that during the latter part of 1981, you were suspended by the district council of your church, the Apostolic Faith Mission. Can you explain why they suspended you?
Yeah, I thought I must explain this when I reread it again. The district, the church is structured in the form of local congregation districts and national. So that I was the secretary of the district council. And they called a meeting of the district council without telling me what the agenda was, and I was the agenda. So I went to the meeting, and within 20 minutes, I was put under suspension, and the reason was I'm involved in politics, I'm embarrassing the church, I appear in the newspapers, and I'm embarrassing the church. But they can only suspend you, that's around August, and then the national executive had to deal with my discipline. And so I went through the disciplinary process of the church. I think by October or so, it was completed. I got suspended indefinitely. And pastors, they do terrible things at times, and they suspend them for 1 year and they come back again. I was suspended indefinitely until you repent. Yeah, you are suspended until you repent. And so we started looking for accommodation because they gave us 2 months to vacate the house with my dear wife. My Lord, I'm doing this for the first time with my wife here because she said she doesn't want to listen to these stories. I must write a book so people can read it. Because it's not a good thing to talk about your torture. And so we looked for a house in Soweto. Before we could settle it, the police detained me. And then the church stuck to their deadline to throw her out of the men's. And some charitable people, friends, assisted to secure the house to make sure she is in the house. So that's when my next detention, which was the fourth one, started.
Reverend, some irony in the fact that the church, the Apostolic Faith Mission, did not appear to be that charitable or compassionate in relation to you and your family.
Yeah, actually the painful thing is that I was talking about this on Tuesday in the presence of the new president of the church, Pastor Bahlong. The irony about this is that the AFM has changed radically. The AFM was divided into colored, Indian, African, white. And what the white church was the legal entity, and they declared us adherents to the church in terms of a clause which was passed in Parliament. And the action is, you've got district council of black leaders, but chaired by a white missionary. And so what they would say is, like 76 when I started in Krugersdorp, they paid me a stipend for 1 month, and the white people who were contributing the money, members, said, if Frank Chikanetestifying is part of your list, we'll withdraw all our funding. And I then said, no, let them not withdraw this funding for these poor pastors, take me out of the list. So I was never paid between 76 and 2010 by the church, whatever I did in the church. But it was the white section of the church dictating what happens. And the chair of the district was Pastor Peterson, is the one who chaired the meeting to suspend me. And then at the national again, it's a missionary, white missionary who chaired the meeting. So the black church was more under control in terms of what the white membership was doing. But I'm saying this because when we united in 96, Dr. Isaac Berger, who was the leader of the white church, publicly asked for forgiveness about what they did to me, and we united. Actually, we are the only church which was divided that has reached unity than those who were even liberal, in a sense. So I just want to put it within context, so we don't talk about the church, AFN, as if it's what it was. It is now. It was what it was then. But there was no sympathy because they believed I'm a terrorist amongst white members of the church. And the Dr. Isaac Berger, who's still alive, did say to me, I never believed that you were tortured. I couldn't believe that my people could do such things. They were kept so ignorant and read nothing about our experiences. And that's where the success of apartheid system was that they would keep whites ignorant about what was happening. There was even a law which said a white person must get permission to visit Soweto. Whites had to apply for a permission to be in Soweto. that means
all the black countries.
yeah, it was for all the black townships. There was a law that prescribed that they should apply for permission to. So when they came to the townships, they had to get permission. And that's how apartheid was done, in a way that it keeps whites ignorant about the awful things they were doing to us and justified our torture and called us terrorists. I even, in my case, said these propaganda leaflets about communists who torture people, who hang people down, head down. They used to have those leaflets, propaganda. And I said, well, what you say the communists do, this government, which claims to be Christian, has done to you. Everything that you say. And it took a long time before they got to understand this. And then I must say that, I think that church has changed, basically.
Thank you, Reverend. Can we now move to your fourth and longest period of detention, which you say was between the 20th of November 1981 and the 7th of July 1982. And I suspect that this period of detention will be of most interest to the court because it coincided in part with the detention at John Foster Square of the late Dr Neil Aggett. Perhaps we can begin, Reverend, by you can describe to the court how you were arrested and where you were taken.
I was arrested again from the church in Krugersdorp. That's where I was arrested, and that was November. It was a very rough experience. I'm of the view that I was arrested by the security police which operated from Protea in Soweto. So they arrested me, took me to Protea police station. I was kept at Mondio police station. That's where I was kept. And that's the place where they even forgot. There were no detainees there. I was the only one. They even forgot I exist. They locked me up and changed shifts. And I missed meals because they forgot there's a human being in those cells. But the torture was quite extreme. It was around issues about people I was ministering to, people who have gone to exile, people I interacted with, and in particular, I put that name yesterday because I thought it's very important. The name of Lillian Keagile, which appears in paragraph 20. I happen to, and I refer to Ernest Jipale in paragraph 23.
If we could just pause for a moment. So you're now talking about your experiences at John Foster Square, not Protea Police Station.
No, starting from Protea Police Station.
Okay, so we're still at Protea Police Station.
We are at Protea Police Station, okay. But the detention in Protea Police Station was related to also because when they moved me from Protea to John Foster, it was like a continuation. So what the John Foster people said to me was, those people in Protea Police Station didn't have sufficient information about you. We have more information about you. That's why I'm brought to John Foster.
What's Mondio?
Mondio, it's when you are in Southgate Mall, driving south, it's on the left-hand side. That's where Mondio is. And the police station where they kept me was in Mondio. Yeah, but there were no detainees there. I was the only one there. So it's a whole corridor of cells without people except myself. But that's the time I was in the hands of the Protea security police. They used to pick me up during the night, go and beat me up, torture me. And at one stage, they did what was done to me. They were tracking some people from Botswana to South Africa, and you could hear from their walkie-talkies that they are talking about a movement. They chained me against a chair and left me there, and went to do this operation and to intercept people in Krugersdorp and other things, and came in the morning. It was done about 1 o'clock, came in the morning to come and unchain me and send me back to the police station. It was a horror story, because when they come and pick you up at 1 in the morning to go and torture you, it's meant to disorientate you. And you don't know where they are taking you to when they pick you up. Then I was transferred to John Foster. But the case...
Can we just check the date? Because in paragraph 3 of your signed statement, that's the exhibit for the first inquest, B3.1.2. The date given there is the 20th of January 1982, that you were transferred from Protea to John Foster Square. Is that right?
Yes, it's about January. Okay. So I spent about 2 months in Protea police station, staying and being kept at the police station and tortured in Protea police station. Then I was transferred to. Now, for me, the 2 major cases, except many other things they were interrogating me about. My Lord, I need to say that in the earlier detention, they would even put records of how I prayed in a service. You prayed in Vereeniging against the apartheid government. Yeah, and beat you up for it. It was like you are generally against them. So the cases, I can't separate the 2, but I would like to deal with them together. The Protea and there were 2 major issues they were questioning me about. The one was about Lillian Kiachile. Now, they detained us. The NSG Pane would be the person who, when I had to go to Botswana, drove me to Botswana. So he was also detained there. And NSG Pane died during that detention. They released him and detained him again whilst we were still there. And he died the second round. But I then understood that he's related to Lillian Kiachile. But Lillian Kiachile served 6 years in jail after this detention. But she had a policeman, security policeman, who was in love with her. And she didn't know that this is a policeman or has been recruited, and knew everything she did, including our interaction with her during the struggle, and therefore believed I knew what Lillian Kiachile was doing, but I didn't know much. And they tortured her quite severely and charged her afterwards. They wanted some of us to be witnesses, and we said, no, I'm not going to be a witness against anybody. The second person was Cedric Mason. Cedric Mason worked with us in the struggle within the church. He's a Methodist priest and was part of the Institute for Contextual Theology, worked closely with Bear Slotty, supported a lot of us. Those were leads. And the Cedric Mason ran some operation of his own and then sent letters to dead letter boxes. But actually the police were tracking that. And they believed that I was part of that operation. And I was tortured for that. So there were a number of issues they were torturing me for and wanted me to make statements to implicate people when I don't have the information that they were looking for.
Thank you. In paragraph 21, you say that while at John Vorster Square, you were interrogated and assaulted by someone by the name of Pete Seifert.
Yeah.
On one occasion during the detention. Can you describe where in John Vorster Square that took place and approximately when, if you have an idea?
Well, we were general on the second floor where we were kept. That's where the cells were, I think. But they used to take us to 10th floor on the John Vorster Square 10th floor. That's where the interrogation happened and the torture there. Their method was very interesting because it made you, they bring a team that looks very friendly and try to encourage you to say, if you don't talk, these bad guys will come here and kill you. So you need to talk. And then if they feel you are not talking, they would then let these guys come. And they were very violent. But they do it so quickly and go. You don't have a picture of them. They torture you and get out of the space. And then those who remain with you try to be friendly. So this particular Seifert, I can only recall when I saw the records, I had forgotten the names, but now the old records can tell you that he did something that's beyond the general, because he was there most of the time. And I think they became very angry when I said to them, you can't force me to make statements about people I know nothing about. And they write the statement for you, so you sign it. Of course, in the middle of the torture, the beatings, you could sign a statement. But when they said, do it under oath, I said, no, I've read it carefully. It doesn't represent the truth. And then he got very angry and started beating me up. And Warrant Officer Deercliffs was there most of the time. I think he must have been the person who had to take care of me in terms of all these processes. Actually, this morning my dear wife said when Aggett died, where the families came to visit us because there was an uproar. People thought all of us are dead. So they had to prove we are alive, allowed our families to see us. And she came to see me. And I decided that day we must give you powers of attorney to run the family because she couldn't access my accounts and etc. And she remembered this morning that it's Warrant Officer Deercliffs who handled those documents for me to sign and etc. To give her powers of attorney. So that was one of the rough moments when I said no. They get frustrated because you could see that the captain wants info from them, they must get it from you. If they can't get it from you and they have to report to the captain that they can't get it, It's almost like you're failing to do your job, and then they become more violent. Because they would leave satisfied they're finished with you, and you think you had to tell them a story that will let them get out of you. And then they will come back more violent, and you say, but what has happened? Because I thought we are done. But clearly, when they go to their commanders, I'm sure they would say, you've not done your job. We want this information. We want that. And we had to agree even when it's false.
Thank you. You indicate that Warrant Officer Detlefs was present during your assault.
Yeah.
Pete Seifert. Now, if I can refer you to the unsigned affidavit that was put up as an exhibit in the first inquest, my Lord, that's the one marked B 3.4.5. And I see a paragraph 5 of that affidavit, page 2. There's a heading there titled Contact with Warrant Officer N.J. Detlefs.
Yeah.
And there you say he never assaulted you, but he did insult and abuse you. Can you describe to the court how he insulted and abused you?
Yeah. That's difficult to I can't use his words. I mean, the insult, undermining language, yeah, treating you like less than a human being, calling you a kafir, predicant, you know, I wouldn't want to use the language because, I mean, it's really abusive language that if a person wants to undermine you, because they want to break you, you know, this kafir predicant who behaves this way and that way, and etc. So at that time, because I wrote this whilst my mind was fresh that time, and I could only take it as far as being referred as a kafir or a predicant. But to use the language, they are very abusive. You know, the language was terrible, swearing at you, doing all sorts of things. But he never assaulted me, but I was assaulted in his presence.
And this will take place in one of the 10th floor offices of John Foster's
on the 10th floor, yeah.
So you say that he never assaulted you, but other officers assaulted you in his presence?
In his presence. And I think that's what that paragraph deals with. I was assaulted intermittently during the first few days of my interrogation. I was assaulted by the said Seifert in the presence of Detlefs. That was the only occasion that I was actually physically abused at John Foster in this particular detention.
And if we can just unpack what you mean by assault, what kind of physical assault did you endure at the hands of Seifert?
So that's what you don't want to repeat. They assaulted you, they beat you up. They used anything that they can use to beat you up. Remember that in detention you are totally in their hands. I always say that I suspect that Biko couldn't allow them to do that to him. And that's why they killed him. So you needed to measure your resistance, to what extent, how do you survive, and to be beaten when you can't defend yourself. It's a painful thing. it's worse if they've chained you up and beaten you when you are chained up. It's I wouldn't want to go further than that.
I see. And Reverend, I must apologize for raising these traumatic times for you.
Yeah.
But it will assist the court if there is some detail. For example, during that assault, were you restrained or chained? If you can recall.
I think I can't remember the details because at times they kept you on leg irons. They bring you with, like a normal prisoner, but take out the handcuffs, but leave your leg irons so that you don't run around. But I can't remember at this particular moment the state in which I was, but I remember it was very violent because this Fert must be the one who went to the captain. I've forgotten his name now. The captain at that time, he was he was like a bull who wanted information. They must do whatever they need to do to get the information he wants because he must convict people. So I wouldn't remember the details. I must say that during the time I was at John Foster, this matter does arise from time to time. I was taken to a window, 10th floor, where I was told this is where they took out Timon, and that they were going to throw me out of that window if I don't talk. And I didn't tell them what they want, and they actually did an action to try to put me at the window as if they are throwing me out and brought me back again. So they used every method they could, hopefully to break you so that you can sign a statement or agree with them about what they want from you.
So when they did that, the team was Inquest operation done.
No.
In this
Not the team.
1981.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't know the sequence of it. But it was a famous story. Like when Biko died, I was in Rustenburg prison in solitary confinement. The first time I heard that Biko has died, it's from the security police. They came to me and said, Biko is dead, and you're going to die like him. It was a language they used in the process.
What I'm trying to get at is that we know that in the Biko trial,
Inquest.
in the inquest of Timon, they had put up a version that he jumped out the window.
Yes.
Now I'm trying to say that when they took it to that window to demonstrate, they did not say that Timon jumped out of it or that we threw him out.
They threw him out.
That's what they told you.
And and that they were going to do the same with me.
Okay.
They were going to do the same.
This is 1981.
Yeah, it's 1982, I think.
See, the Timon inquest must have been finalized then because he died in 1971.
Yes, I can't say, but whatever the case, that story was a public story that Timon had gone out of the window and that the police were saying he jumped out. We didn't believe it. And so when they said it to me, it just confirmed my views that Timon didn't jump out of the window. They threw him out of that window. Whether he was alive by the time they threw him out, one would know.
My Lord, for the record, and I can talk with some authority because I represented the Timol family in reopened inquest. So Ahmed Timol was murdered in 1971. The inquest was held in 1972. And at that point in time, the inquest magistrate found that he had committed suicide and nobody was to blame. And in the reopened inquest in 2017, Judge Motley found that Timo had been murdered and the security branch had thrown him out of the 10th floor window.
Confirming what the witness said, that they actually told him.
Indeed, so that was some 10 years later. If we could just go back to the incident of assault by Seyfert, and I'm not going to press you on the details. I understand that it is traumatic. You have said both in your recent affidavit as well as this unsigned affidavit, and indeed the signed affidavit before the 1982 inquest, that this was done in the presence of Warrant Officer Deercliffs. Now, did Warrant Officer Deercliffs did he attempt to stop the assault? Did he object? What did he do at that time?
No. I mean, for me, it was part of it, even if he didn't touch me, but I mean, he didn't say you can't do it. You know what I mean? The only place when something was stopped, it was during the 7 days detention in John Foster, where I mean, more than 10 policemen went on top of me on the floor. I mean, they jumped on boots and everything. And somebody then stopped it at a particular moment. That's the only time when, but it wasn't like stopping it because it shouldn't happen. But I'm sure he realized that I would die and stopped it. But no, not in this particular case. I mean, Deercliffs was there, and yeah, the best they can say to you is that if you don't talk to us, the rough guys will come. You know, talk to us, or the rough guys will come.
And at some point, did you make an official complaint about this assault?
Yes, I did. I mean, normally they would have a magistrate or a judge who visits you once a month, 3 weeks, to ask for a nachgeklachtes. I mean, that's what they would say when they come to you. But it was a useless exercise because they did nothing after you have reported about those matters. I do give an example of my request for the Bible, a simple thing, because all detainees were given the Bible in detention. The only thing that you were allowed was the Bible, but I wasn't given the Bible, and so I complained, and they said, no, Bible mark you a terrorist, so it's not going to help to give you a Bible. And it took 3 months talking to a judge in this case who came, a retired judge, to get them to get me a Bible. And when they did, they gave me an Afrikaans one. And to make sure you ask for a Bible, there's the Bible. And I always say, my Lord, that I read that Afrikaans Bible 3.5 times. Yeah, from Genesis to Revelations, because you were sitting in a cell, there was nothing else except this Bible. So they didn't act, but in this particular case, in the paragraph C of the unsigned statement, we do refer to, I saw Inspector of Detainees Morton, and I must rely on this text because I had already forgotten the names. And I reported about this matter. I cannot recall when the visit took place, although it did take place sometime after the assault. And as a result, of my making the complaint to the inspector, I subsequently saw Sergeant Blom, which is in the record, who then took a statement, etc. But nothing came out of it, as far as I can remember.
You do indicate in paragraph 6 of your unsigned statement that at first, at least, you couldn't, you didn't know the names of the people who had assaulted you and who was present.
Yeah.
But then you were able to identify Detlefs and Seifert.
Yeah.
Perhaps you can indicate how it is that you got to eventually name them.
Yeah, I would have to rely on this text because this is the earliest. I mean, if you asked me today to remember those details, would be very, very difficult. Yeah, I would rely on this.
Okay, well, it is a matter of public record as to how you got to identify Detlefs and Seifert, and the Lord, it is set out in paragraph 6.
Yeah, at the end.
So Sergeant Blom came to see me for a second time.
Yeah, on the second occasion that she visited me, I was initially unable to identify Detlefs. Sergeant Blom was assistant that I identified the person concerned by name. I saw her go into Detlef's office and she returned with a list of names. I was then able to identify the persons concerned, namely Detlefs and Seifert. You see, they call each other by name, so you have to work out who is who, and I was able to work out that Detlefs and Seifert were the people who were involved.
Yes. And in the same paragraph, I have a question that arises. You say that on the first visit, after leaving Sergeant Blom's office, I saw Detlefs entering the office with others while Sergeant Blom was still there. I just heard them talking to her, but I could not hear what was being said. So this was in fact moments after you had given your statement to Sergeant Blom. Then Detlefs enters the office and confers with Sergeant Blom.
Yeah.
And what was your reaction to that incident?
You know, for me, they were birds of the same. What is it? Feather. I mean, you've got policemen assaulting you, you've got another policeman investigating. They are all together here. You don't know what their relationships are. For me, it was a formality. Really, I did not expect anything from them. I expected that they would collaborate. They never sell each other out, even if they were present when you were tortured or beaten up. I've not seen policemen doing that. They always work together. At least if they brought maybe a judge or a magistrate, it might have worked differently. But you are in their hands, you are being tortured. And another policeman comes to investigate your complaint. You don't know who this guy is. For me, it's just the same.
Reverend, do you know what the outcome was of that investigation?
No, I got nothing out of it, from my point of view.
Right.
Like all the other complaints, you never got results, except the Bible I fought for. And I used to say to the judge who came to me, retired judge, you have asked for Klachtes last month, the other month, but you've done nothing, so I have nothing to tell you anymore. because it doesn't help to tell you anything.
I can inform you, Reverend, that ultimately the Attorney General refused to prosecute anybody arising from your complaint.
Yeah.
And my Lord, for the record, Sergeant Blom, who testified in the first inquest, confirmed that she investigated the complaint. That's at page 498 of the record. And then at page 810 of the record, counsel, I believe it was counsel for the police, confirmed that the Attorney General had refused to prosecute. And Reverend, while we're dealing with your unsigned statement, there's another heading there titled Description of Activities of Warrant Officer McPherson. Do you recall what his position or job was at John Foster Square?
My memory is failing me now. I can't. It's long ago. Yeah.
Perhaps you do not allow them to include a statement so that you can recall.
Yes.
They don't include a statement in the tea break and then maybe say recall.
Perhaps it's 11:13, so perhaps we can take the tea journal and he can then read through those.
Paragraph 7, 8. It's a long one, but 15, maybe both evidence if you want to lead evidence to make it easier and faster.
That's the conclusion.
At this time, can we take a chair for adjournment?
Could you read through
I'll scan this.
Yeah.
Just to see.
the unsigned
Just Yeah.
tea time, did you have an opportunity to read through your statement?
Yeah, I had an I didn't pay attention to this because I thought it's about details of the happenings within the cells and how they moved us from one place to another, exercises, things that were allowed. That's what it's dealing with. And I can see that at the time we did this statement, they would have put the question to me to say, what did the Macpherson, who was responsible for us there?
Yes.
Now I wouldn't have remembered the name, but now that they are saying it, that would have been the person who was taking care of us.
Right, thank you.
Yeah.
So for the moment, we're actually going to leave your unsigned statement, and we'll return just to a few aspects of it a little later.
Yeah.
We're going to return to the affidavit that, in fact, you signed only yesterday.
Yeah.
And in paragraph 23, you say that you were kept in the cells on the second floor with the other political detainees, and that you were moved at least 3 times, and you initially occupied cell number 210. During the tea break, we gave you a floor plan of the second floor male section. And my lord, this is page 4 of Exhibit G10. My lord, I do have a spare copy if you can't find yours. There you go.
Page 4 G10.
Perhaps, my lord, we can just hand up a color copy of the floor plan. Now, Reverend Chikane, I totally appreciate that. This is some 38 years back. But if you looked at the floor plan, do you think you might be able to point out where cell number 210 was? Bearing in mind that the cell numbers have changed, they no longer reflect the numbers at that time.
Yeah. Even the structure might have changed a little bit. But my lord, if you, entering from where they say you are here, which must have been the entry point from wherever the office is, I think I was put on the first corridor first when I arrived there. I wouldn't know which one of those cells are. The number in my statement says 210, but it comes from the old statements. But I was on that corridor, and then I was changed to the next corridor there, which I call it an L shape, so the second part of it. And I would have been in cell number 8, cell number 8, 6, 7, around there, where they've got B16, B17, B18. And then I was then changed to what now comes either as B20 or B21. I suspect it would be B20 there, because what I remember very well is that when you were in those 2 other cells where I was, you couldn't see the people when they pass, because the hole is, if you look through the hole, if they go past, you wouldn't know who was there, unless if they stood there. But from that cell 20B1, I was able to see activity on the corridor. And that was, by the way, very helpful to me, because being in solitary confinement, you see nothing except yourself in the cell and when they come to give you food. But this gave me an opportunity to look at people doing exercises or taking, detainees in and out. You could see that activity. And that would have been the cell where I would have been. And then, of course, after Aggett's death, there were changes again. I wouldn't remember where we were.
Thank you, Reverend. And then moving to paragraph 24 of your recent affidavit, you point out that certain items were prohibited in the cells.
Yeah.
Can you give examples and explain why?
Yeah, I mean, they took out belts and shoelaces and, anything they thought you could use to hurt yourself or hang yourself with, and left you with your bare minimum things like clothes and the blankets and the mattress, which they used. I don't know what they call them. It's not a mattress, but it's a flat type of...
Like a mat.
Yeah, a mat, yeah, like a mat. So that's all they allowed you. Before Aggett's death, in solitary confinement, your family doesn't know where you are. So they wouldn't bring you anything, actually. When I was in Rustenburg, I know my mother worked it out. Prisoners informed her. She came to Rustenburg from Soweto, and the police told her, I'm not there. There's no such a person here. And of course, they came to tell me that we just told your mother you are not here. Because those policemen felt very guilty about the black policemen who were around with us. Felt very guilty and would come and share information with you in the process. So no, they would not allow you food from outside or anything. But after Aggett's death, certain things happened that were not allowed to happen.
Yes, and we'll come to that shortly. It's interesting that you indicate that you were provided with blankets, but not sheets.
No, there are no sheets.
No sheets?
Yeah, the white section had beds and sheets and blankets. In the black section, there were no sheets there. It's just a blanket and the mat.
Okay.
In all the detentions I was kept in, you only had the mat and the blanket.
Thanks. Well, the evidence so far, Reverend, is that certainly on the second floor, although it appeared that some detainees might have been privileged over others, like there were no sheets or beds.
No. No, I never had a sheet or bed in all my detentions.
And you indicated that the cells were searched on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Do you recall how frequent?
I wouldn't remember, but they didn't give notice. But they did search the cells for. They were trying to check whether we are communicating, whether we have information, whether, So they would come and search the cells. They suspected at times that we might be getting information through the regular police or something like that.
And now, prior to the death of Neil Aggett, what other items were you allowed? And here I'm thinking of things such as books and sweets and other odd items, games, etc.
Except the Bible, nothing. In my case, because even the clothes you had, were limited in terms of what you had in the cell. So I can't remember having anything else for reading,
And you do make a comment at paragraph 12 of your unsigned statement that you can't comment on whether or not Neil Aggett's cell was as well stocked as it is stated by the police.
Yeah. No, I wouldn't, because I would not have had a chance to look at the cell. Once they put him in that corridor where I was, where I could look through the hole, once they go into the cell, that was it. It's a dark spot. You don't know what's happening on that other side. And if you walk through for exercises or they take you elsewhere, you can't look through the hole into the cells. It's not possible.
Right. We've heard evidence in these proceedings that in Dr. Aggett's cell, after his death, they discovered 19 books, chess sets, games, sweets, and the like. What's your reaction to that?
Well, maybe there were others who were more privileged than us, but no, it would have been nice if I had all that.
I'm sure.
I had nothing. Absolutely nothing. I mean, you struggled, my Lord, with just the food they were giving you. They will throw the plate under the grill door, and then when they come next, they want the same plate to put food on it. And it has not been washed, it still has the food you haven't eaten, because you can't eat this food. And they told me, well, why didn't you wash it? I said, where do you wash it? He said, the toilet. Water, it's there in the toilet. At that point, I realized, that's tough here. And so you use the coffee they give you to try to wash the plate so that you can eat next time. So you drank your coffee, got away, use the rest to wash. Of course, they do that when you arrive, so that they put lots of pressure on you. But afterwards, they didn't ask me to use the same plates. But there was nothing in the cell where I was. It's only during the treason trial, of course, where we had access to food and things coming from the family. Once you are charged, you can receive them.
And in your recent affidavit from paragraph 26, you indicate that while on the second floor cells of the male section, you and some of the detainees developed a system to
communicate.
Do you recall what that system was?
No, we had to find ways of communicating. You are creative when you are in that spot. So I was in the corridor, the first corridor there, and I was sent a note to say, empty the water in the toilet during the night, and we'll talk to you. So I thought this was funny. So I experimented, empty the water. Fortunately, there's a drainage there. And once you emptied the water in the toilet, you could talk to the other detainees through the toilet. And so we're able to work out who is around and how they were tortured or had experience. And because of that, you had to keep that toilet very clean. Because you need it during the night for communication. Of course, the other communication was through prisoners. In Rustenburg, it worked better there. they would tell you, these are ordinary prisoners who clean cells. And they would know there are these detainees there. They are ordinary, prisoners. But they would want to be helpful to these detainees. So they will come in the cell clean while the police are watching. And they will say to me, next time, use the toilet to do a message, put it in the Colgate box at that time, because you got the Colgate box. You could then put the toilet paper inside there with a message, and they will make sure it reaches Soweto from Rustenburg. The prisoners, when they go to court, they give it to family and say, the Reverend Chikanetestifying is in that cell, can you pass it over to the family? And they did it. They didn't have to know lots of the detainees. So that's how my family knew I was in Rustenburg. And they came and they told them I'm not there. So there were many ways in which we tried to break the system, and even prisoners assisted us. At times it's the police who assisted us. It's not in our statement, but my Lord, it might interest you to know the dynamics between the detainee, the white security police, and the black security police. Because the black security police were discriminated against, treated, in my view, like that, and were just guards, even when they were senior. When they go away, they make sure they take care of you. When they come back, they take over. But there's also the uniformed police who take care of you in the cells. And one of those policemen decided he wouldn't lock my cell up to 9 in the night. So when he went past, I said to him, why are you not locking the cell? Lock it. He said, no, my conscience doesn't allow me anymore to lock you up. So I said, you lose your job. Just lock, because I'm not going to run away, and I'm not going anywhere. Just lock for the sake of your job. He was so angry. He came back to me and said, I'm going to lock you in, and I'm going to beat a white policeman so they dismiss me, because they couldn't allow them to resign. And I never saw him again. And months after I was released, he saw me in a street, stopped in a van, came to talk to me and said, I'm the policeman who was refusing to lock you up. So there was lots of pain, even amongst the police who were taking care of me.
Do you recall whether black policemen were able to assist you in any other means?
Yeah, some of them would be able to pass over information. It was a risky operation. They would, for instance, I knew about Aggett's death through one of those policemen who let me know about, because they wouldn't tell me that somebody has died. Then, of course, we'll communicate via the toilet telephone to let others know as well.
Yes. So I can just check the toilet telephone that you were using on the second floor male section of John Vorster Square, and the smuggling through the toothpaste boxes that took place.
That's Rustenburg. Yeah, that's Rustenburg.
And while using the toilet telephone, you would get a sense as to who was on the floor with you.
Yeah.
And what might be happening with them.
Yeah, actually, that's what I'm saying. Life in detention, it's a different type of life, because to survive, we had to even make jokes about torture. My Lord, to laugh at each other. How did they treat you yesterday? And then we tell you what happened to them. And the way to survive is to laugh about it and say, hey, I survived yesterday, how did you go? So there was a bit of communication, but it wasn't regular. because you had to watch the police moving around, so you get off the toilet, and so it wasn't like it's a free it's a free exercise. But it happened more when I was on the first corridor, not on the second corridor.
I see. But you indicate that you were not able to communicate directly with Neil Aggett through the telephone?
No. It was other comrades that were able to communicate.
You also point out in paragraph 29 that you were suffering from a vitamin D deficiency,
Yes.
lack of sunlight, and they would take you to a higher place, but you had certain fears. What were those fears?
Yeah. Before I answer that question, there's something that's not in my statement, that we used to be taken to a doctor who took care of prisoners after, the first detention, the third degree, stuff. My body was in a real mess, and so that doctor made drawings of where I had injuries and etc. and so forth. But on this particular instance, when we visited the doctor, he found that most of us were vitamin D deficient, because in John Foster Square, you don't do exercises outside. If it's a prison like Rustenburg, they take you out to the sun, you do exercises. But in John Foster, you do exercises along those corridors. You never see the sun for months in, months out. So they detected we are vitamin D deficient. And then they arranged for us to be taken to the top of the building. I don't know whether it was the highest. I think it must be like third floor or something, not the 10th floor, where the cells were. And they will take you to the top of the building with a policeman, and you sat there for 30 minutes with him, and then go down. It was supposed to happen daily, 30 minutes. But it was the scariest thing you could have. If you have to sit with that policeman at the top of the building, they could push you over. And you sat there hoping that nobody is going to push you over into the streets. That's. And most of those police would be the black policemen. They will take you to that space.
And by that point, you really had the fear, because you had already been threatened that you would be thrown
through
as
the
Timon had been thrown.
Yeah.
Talking of complaints, Reverend Chikane, in your unsigned statement of paragraph 8, you make reference to the operation of a complaints book, which you say you generally sign this book every day.
Yeah, when I was initially asked by the lawyers, I didn't actually remember about this book. But I think they had to, because it was mandatory for them to take you for 30 minutes for exercises and 30 minutes to the sun. And so you had to sign something that it did happen, just as proof. So they had their own control system to have evidence that they were following the requirements of the law.
And you also indicate that you would fill in a certain section of this complaints book, and then McPherson, who was one of the officers in charge of the second floor, would countersign it.
Yeah.
You recall that?
Yeah.
And typically, what would you complain about in that book?
I mean, if there are, if you were not treated well, or you missed a meal, because at times they forgot you. You missed a meal, or you were not taken for exercise or something, you would have some complaint there. But you stopped writing anything there because it doesn't help you.
Right.
Yeah.
Although you did indicate that you did have some health complaints relating to high blood pressure.
I did, because I developed high blood pressure during that detention, and since then I had to get permanent treatment up to today. I did complain about high blood pressure.
And as a result, you did see the district surgeon and secure medication.
Yeah.
You also indicated in paragraph 14 of your unsigned affidavit that a high-ranking member would visit the cells each morning.
Yeah.
And you say this was a Colonel Oosthuizen.
Yeah.
What was the purpose of those visits?
We had a number of visits. Some of them didn't make sense to me. I mean, we had a retired judge coming once in a time, then a magistrate, and then there would be the ordinary police, and then this one would have been the security. This is the uniform branch visit. This would be the uniform branch. This Oosthuizen, and I think it's a high-ranking member of the uniform branch, not the security police. And he would just come and open the cell, make sure you are there, and pass. I mean, as I say in that statement, he just said, "Are you okay?" And most of the time you just say, "Yes, I'm okay," because you don't expect much from them.
In paragraph 15, you indicate that there would be checks, including at night. However, they wouldn't wake you up.
No. Yeah, but after the death of Dr. Aggett, they then woke you up. It's almost like, are you still alive? Are you there? Yeah, they would do that. It was disturbing because, I mean, it means when you are asleep, they wake you up, put on the lights.
And prior to Aggett's death, would you know how they would do the checks?
No, they just opened the door, put on the lights, and closed most of the time.
But if they simply checked by peeping through the peephole, you probably wouldn't have known about it.
No. Except that they would have to keep the lights on for them to see you through the hole. So at times they left the lights on. Remember, as a prisoner, you are not in control of the lights. The lights are controlled by them.
And just sticking with the theme of complaints, at paragraph 23 of your unsigned statement, you indicate that you saw the inspector of detainees on a fairly frequent basis.
Page 20, paragraph
23 on page 9.
Yeah.
And we know that you did complain to the inspector of detainees, that's Mr. Mouton.
Mm-hmm.
You indicate that you saw the magistrates frequently, but you never complained except about the food and health. Why was that, Reverend?
Yeah, because I didn't expect much. You give up to the system. Remember, you are totally in their hands, all of them. So you give up in the system ultimately. Maybe when you arrive first, you might complain a lot, but then you realize it's not helpful.
And you also indicate a possible reason. You suggest that the inspector of detainees would channel the complaint to the minister, whereas the magistrate would channel the complaint to the commissioner of police.
I now don't remember their roles, which means at that time when I did the statement, the roles were very clear that this inspector reports to the police, to the minister, and the magistrate reports to the commissioner of police, the complaint. So it doesn't, as I read it now, it's not like reporting, it's giving you, the commissioner of police, a complaint to satisfy the fact that they have handed it over. But there was no process of feedback.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it seems as if the attorneys who consulted with you in 1982, they canvassed the question of interrogations on the 10th floor, and what you could see through the partitions between
they
some of those officers.
Yeah.
And it was described as what you could see through the frosted glass. To an adjoining office.
Yeah.
Perhaps you can explain to the court that you were interrogated in one of the rooms and you had an opportunity to look through that.
Yeah,
glass?
What they were trying to get from me, it's just they were talking to the detainees who were on the 10th floor to say, could you see through, could you hear what was happening in the next interrogation room, and that, glass partitioning in some of the rooms, could you see through? And my view was that you couldn't see exactly what was happening. Inside there, you could just see movements. But in other interrogation rooms, there were no glass see-through stuff. It's walls. Like where I was with Warrant Officer Deercliffs. You were just in that room. You can't see anything else beyond.
So the court has conducted an inspection in loco on that floor, and also looked at the partitioning in at least one of the offices, and from what we could see, the glass wasn't frosted, so it wasn't like misty, but rather it was ribbed. So it had folds in the glass, which also obscured vision to some degree. So you indicate in paragraph 18 that you couldn't see details of the person, but you could discern movement.
Yeah. If you are in that type of room, you can discern movements, but you can't really tell what's happening there.
And Reverend Chikane, did you ever decide to request the security branch to interrogate you for longer periods?
I don't understand that. I was asked by the lawyers. I don't understand that, because how could you ask for more interrogation? It's enough. You are happy to be left alone rather than staying longer. I'm not sure what they were trying to find out.
Yes. Well, the evidence on the police version is that Dr. Aggett, at his request, had to endure a period of detention for some 60 hours, a period of interrogation at least.
His request. I can't see anybody asking, interrogate me more. I think the quicker they finish and let you go, the better. And that's why I couldn't handle the 48 hours, 24 hours around the clock detention and interrogation, because it's tiring. I mean, you don't have to, 3 hours is enough, especially if people are violent.
They did claim, and this is part of the police version, that they were bringing camp beds, a camp bed for Dr. Aggett to sleep on. Did you ever experience a camp bed being brought in?
No.
if we could turn to the last time that you saw Neil Aggett. You did indicate earlier in your evidence that you had seen Dr. Aggett
it's in paragraph 33, the last time I saw.
Yes, I just want to make sure that I'm correct in saying that you had seen Dr. Aggett on one occasion previously.
Yeah, through the whole, because if he was on either cell 9 or 8. The time I was in what I call cell 10, which was 210. But for me, it was like 1, 2, 3, 4, up to 10. So he was in one of those cells. So when they take him out, I would see him like I would see other detainees. And NSD Pane was also on that corridor, and I could see through the hole. But I can't say how many times now.
So, in the last week before the death of Neil Aggett, you indicate that you were possibly occupying cell B21, which, as you have pointed out in the floor plan, is at the far end of that cell block. That you were then able to see the corridor. Can you describe to the court how you were able to see Dr. Aggett and what condition you saw him in?
Yeah, that's the last picture I have of him, and it's not a good picture to talk about. But I mean, I had seen him walking with the police before, normal, feet and etc. But when he appeared from that corridor, because you hear sounds when you are in the cell, and then you go to the hole to go and see. It was interesting to see activity. And then I saw him coming with the police, struggling to walk, and he was bending forward like that. Almost like he was not able to pick up his body. It felt like the time I was chained myself against my feet, and for hours when you come out of it you can't raise your back because it's painful, and he was struggling to walk. He was slow, almost like a patient who was being assisted to get to the cell. I looked very weak in my view and distressed. I'm trying to get words of describing that particular scene because it was a few minutes until they put him into the cell. As I'm saying, it would have been like, B17 or B18 in terms of this structure. And that was the last time I saw him.
Indeed, in paragraph 5 of your unsigned affidavit, you say that your recollection of him was the posture was that of a man who had been broken.
Yeah. I mean, it was clear to me that he had gone through the worst of what that detention would be like. If they beat you up, unless you reach a stage where you have concoctions, you are still able to walk. if they kept you standing like me for 48 hours, 50th hour, I couldn't walk. I had to be assisted because your feet are swollen and etc. But in his case, I mean, it was, he looked awful. I didn't get close to him, so I can't give more details about it.
And was this in stark contrast with how he appeared the first time you had seen him?
Definitely.
And that's in fact in paragraph 4 of your unsigned affidavit that your signed affidavit at least.
Oh, the signed.
The signed affidavit, that's Exhibit B 3.1.2.
And paragraph
4.
4, yeah. Yeah.
Where you indicate that this was when you had been placed in cell 210, which you said was next to Aggett's cell. Mm-hmm. At that time, you had occasion to see him.
Yeah.
You weren't able to communicate with him, but perhaps describe to the court, the glimpses you did have, what condition he was in at that time.
What I say here is that on occasions that I saw Dr. Aggett during the aforementioned period, he did not give me the impression that he was a man suffering either from mental or physical stress. In fact, he appeared quite normal. That's what I said.
So you indicate in your affidavit you signed yesterday, Reverend Chikanetestifying, that security branch detention at that time takes its toll.
Yeah.
And that this impacted on yourself.
Oh, yeah.
So can you just describe to the court how the effects of solitary confinement and abuse impacted you?
Yeah, I mean, I experienced that more in Rustenburg prison because this prison was new, so there were no detainees there. So I was in a long corridor of cells and I was the only one there. There was no sound except people who come to clean and those who brought food. But I realized as time went by, 3 months around being there, that I was beginning to find it difficult just to make choices. At least they gave me choices. They would say, do you want to have exercises first or you want to have a shower first? They would give you that choice. But you would choose to have a shower first under normal circumstances. But if you were not made to have a shower and you missed it and you want to take exercises whilst the sun is there, there were choices you had to make. And when they asked me, I realized I made a choice I don't want to make. It's only when you are now exercising you realize, but I didn't want to exercise. I wanted to have a shower first. But then you realize your brain seems to get affected. And you don't, when you listen, you don't hear properly, and you take time to respond. And I would imagine that's what solitary confinement is made. I discovered that you can't live with sound and people. You can't be normal.
Reverend, the security branch and their approach to how they treated you in detention, were you of the view that they were trying to break you psychologically?
yeah, they want to break you so that you can then say what they want to hear from you and make you to incriminate yourself or incriminate other people, including adding statements. I don't remember which paragraph in the unsigned statement, but I say there, once they read back the statement they've written, interrogating you, you listen carefully and say, well, whatever they are saying, even if it's not true, or it doesn't implicate anybody, I'll agree in any way, because it will lessen the pressure on me. They will stop the torture. But when they come and say, now here's an affidavit, sign it, at least you have had a break to think, and you would then say, no, I can't sign that unless you remove that, and you remove that, and immediately you do that, you invite torture again and assaults. And they will then bring the bad guys. They used to use that language. They will bring the guys that are going to deal with you here, as if there was a team meant to do it. Yeah. So it's meant to break you. I mean, make me stand for 48 hours, feed me with soft porridge irregularly, and nothing else. Can only be meant to break you. It's not meant for anything else. And keep on beating you up. And that, I don't know where that broom came from, but the broomstick, hit you with a broomstick and hang you down, facing downwards, do all sorts of things. You are totally in their hands. You can't do anything about it.
And Reverend Chikane, you were present on the night that Neil Aggett died, allegedly in his cell on the second floor. Do you recall anything of note on that evening, the early morning of the 5th of February 1983?
No, I don't. I was asked that question before, but I mean, I don't remember any activity or sound. Maybe I was asleep. So I can't say that I had activity. But the following morning there was lots of activity during the day around that area. And then they moved us. I think they didn't want us to see what's happening around the space.
And you've indicated that after Dr. Neil Aggett's death, conditions improved.
Aggett's death allowed us to meet family for the first time. That's how I was able to arrange with my wife to sign that powers of attorney, and I told the police I would like to sign powers of attorney and that the documents must be brought, and I was able to sign those documents. So we got new clothes and a new supply of clothes and even some food, which was not the case before. And the torture process stopped during that time.
Reverend Chikane, before I close the reading of my evidence with you, is there anything further you wish to add or inform the court?
No, I wouldn't want to, my Lord, add anything more. I think I've come to this court because for Dr. Aggett, but I wouldn't go anywhere to go and talk about this experience. It's not something we want to repeat. And when I read about it in my book to prepare, you get traumatized about it because it's not something you want to relate to anybody. You know, there are people who are victims who enjoy being permanent victims and tell the story about being victim, but it doesn't help you to heal. So when you have to talk about it again, it doesn't do anything good to you in this regard. Yeah, but I came to do it because for Aggett, we wrote the book No Life of My Own and did a chapter on torture so that if somebody asks me about it, were you tortured? I say read the book so that I don't have to repeat it again.
And for the record, the book is titled No Life of My Own, an autobiography by Frank Chikanetestifying.
And the new text is chapter 9. The old text is chapter 8.
Thank you, Reverend. My Lord, I have no further questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, my Lord. Reverend, I appreciate that you wouldn't like to be reminded of what happened. As much as possible, I will try to limit my question to not re-victimize. So to speak. The Mondo police station, you remember your Lordship asked you about the Mondo police station?
Yeah.
Mondo, you are coming out of Paraguay. And it's in the Mondo police station is in that long road called Columbine.
That's it. Correct.
Towards the Cliff River. Reverend, in your opinion, is a chief, so to call a chief interrogator that is assigned to each detainee? Or you wouldn't know?
You wouldn't know. I mean, you'll work out. Now that I have this affidavit, I now know it was Captain Conrad. You know, when we were in John Foster, clearly Captain Conrad, Major, they call him Major Conrad, was in charge. You could feel that. You work it out, but I mean they change. Different people appear, my Lord, so you can only guess.
Did any torture of whatever kind
I was always taken out to the 10th floor.
Was there any occasion that you were taken up with any other detainees, or were you always alone when you were taken up to the 10th floor?
In principle, in general, not in principle, in general, they did not want detainees to meet or detainees to meet anybody else because you are in solitary confinement, so they have to keep you away from people. But I mean, it does happen that they will detainee and you meet in the corridor, but there will be no opportunity to interact. Even for exercises, they took you one at a time.
Do you know that Detentions is still alive?
I was made aware that he's still alive. I didn't know.
I see. Has he ever apologized to you? Has you ever met him after?
No. I can't remember meeting him. No. I mean, the people who came to apologize to me were the scientists who worked in the laboratory, Flop, Van der Merwe, and the 3 policemen. But I don't remember, unless if we met somewhere where I may not remember.
So in short, he never apologized to you?
I can't remember.
What would be your reaction if he were to deny that he was ever present when you were tortured?
Well, I wouldn't be surprised because he would have been himself and self-threats alone. So my only witness is the guy who tortured me. I don't have another. So I wouldn't be surprised if he denied it. In fact, they did it in a way that they can deny it.
And Sergeant Blom, the one that took your statement, is it a female sergeant? Was it a female sergeant?
I think so, but as I'm saying, I had to read this affidavit to remember even the names. If you asked me before I read it, I would never remember that. Yeah. But the earliest text for me would be the best reference text for memory.
I see. And how did you come to know Ernest Dipale?
I got to know Ernest Dipale because I had a mission to Botswana. And my car was not in order. I was also going to preach there.
Yes.
So my car was not in order. Then they told me there's somebody who drives between Johannesburg and Botswana who can help you. And now that we are in a new South Africa, I can tell you the real story. We are in a new South Africa. So he came to pick me up to take me to Botswana. That's where this lady, Lillian Giachile, was. She came with him. They picked me up at the hospital in Kagiso. And we dropped Giachile in Randfontein, and he drove me straight to Botswana. That's how I got to know him. And I was tortured to tell more about him and Lillian Giachile. And I had no idea. I mean, for me, there were people who were sent to transport me. But that's how I got to know Ernest Dipale.
Yes. Lillian Giachile and baby Joanna would be the same person?
No, they are not the same. Baby Chawa.
Yes.
Yeah, baby Chawa is the current Secretary of Parliament. So I would imagine you are raising it because when I came back from Botswana, baby Chawa was put in that same car to come back with us. I'm sure that's where you get it from.
Yes. She was detained as well at a later stage.
She was also detained.
So, in fact, the people that picked you up from Krugersdorp, from the hospital, Leratong Hospital, it's Dipale and Lillian, not Jiao.
No.
And do you know how Dipale died? You told us he died in detention.
Yeah, I don't know how he died, but we were all detained, and he got released because he was not in the environment. And I'm told he got detained again, and he came back into the cells. And the next we heard is that he had died. I have no idea how it happened.
But were you informed that he had hanged himself?
Well, the story was always either you hanged yourself or you slept in the bathroom shower, or there was a normal story, and we never believed that.
So the common way of allegedly dying in detention was hanging or sleeping on a soap or in a shower.
That's the story they would tell after. That's why I would be very careful when I go to a shower to make sure I don't die there.
And according to the information that I have, Dipale died in August, the same year Dr. Aggett died. What I now want to find out from yourself, at the time Dr. Aggett died, you were in detention, and at the time Dipale died, you were still in detention.
No, I can't confirm.
You can't.
You see, times are...
Yes.
Yeah, I discovered the brain tends to compact things as time goes by. I thought the first incident in Soweto was a day before June 16, but I discovered that afterwards it was 14 days before June 16. So the brain tends to compact things as time. So the sequencing must be based on actual dates as recorded.
Yes.
I think that would be a reliable thing. So what I know is that he was with us, he got released, and then got detained again, and then died in detention. Whether it was during the time we're still there or after, I can't. Yeah.
I appreciate that. And Reverend, when you were deprived of sleep, was it on the 10th floor at John Foster School?
No, it was Krugersdorp. On the 4th floor. Krugersdorp was the 4th floor.
I would imagine that there were always people during these 48 hours, or as security branch police officers during these 48 hours, that would keep watch on you.
Yeah. The people who kept watch would be the black security police guys. They were really used like guards, even if they were senior. And the white security police would be the ones who come and interrogate you, beat you up. And the black policemen also participated because they must show loyalty and that they can be trusted. But when the rest go away, they start a different conversation. So there was activity, but it's 24 hours. They changed shifts. They never left me alone.
Did you know a security branch officer known as Paul Erasmus?
Yeah, I've heard about him. I don't know whether we met physically, but he talked to me by telephone. He did.
Yes.
My Lord, it would be if you were talking about the same Erasmus, he's the one who called me and said he's one of those who put me in the list. See, what they do is the headquarters would say, we're going to have a state of emergency, we're going to detain people. You must put on the list the people who must be detained, who are troublesome. So he called me via Mail and Guardian newspaper to get to me, to say he wanted to talk to me, and he said, I put you in the list. I'm sorry about having done that myself. I think he would have been young at that time, 18 years or something, when he did it. But he was older when he talked to me. I think that should be the Erasmus you are referring to.
Yes, I'm referring to that Erasmus.
Paul Erasmus.
Yeah, Paul Erasmus. And if I recall, you told us that you were asked to write a statement about Ernest Dipal.
Well, it's one of the people they interrogated me about. Actually, it was around the same Lillian Kiachile case, because Ernest Dipal was critical. He drove me there, and they wanted me to confirm his name at that point. And I couldn't, because if they send a person to drive you, you don't pay too much attention to that person. It's not like you have a personal relationship. So, and they thought I knew him well. And I was meeting him for the first time as far as I was concerned. And they interrogated me heavily about Lillian Kiachile. And I said to them, if you find a man with a woman in a car and they give you a lift, you don't ask too much about the person. And we dropped him in Wanfontein. Now, so Wanfontein before proceeding to Botswana. And the police believed I knew what the operation was. I knew what she was doing, and I had to tell them about that. And you get tortured thoroughly to talk about something you don't know.
Yes. Would you remember who asked you to write this statement about Dipal?
No,
You remember?
no, not the detail.
Yes. Was it after his death or before his death? Would you remember?
I was only interrogated about him during my detention.
Yes.
During my detention, not after.
Not after. And thank you, Reverend. And the people who pleaded guilty to attempting to murder you, did they ever apply for amnesty in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission? Do you know?
No, I don't know the details, but what I know is that when they went to the Truth Commission, it's Minister Flock, he did not tell the commission about my poisoning. So it was more about Khotso House and the bombing of Khotso House. My Lord, I didn't say when we were talking about the reasons for my poisoning that they are the same reasons for bombing Khotso House, because the headquarters of the churches in South Africa got the largest bomb to put it down. And so for them, the SACC was the major target.
Reverend, there were 4 Xhosa students that were killed in Kruger's store
Yeah.
by the security police officers. Do you know about that incident?
I would remember that, but not the details.
Not the detail.
In any way, many people were killed in Kruger's
Yes.
by the security police.
My lord, I've got no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, my lord. Reverend Chikane, I recognize that it was a traumatic experience for you, even here today, was then during the time, and I accept that it was difficult to testify. I appear on behalf of Detentions as well as Venter, which I don't think is involved with you, and I have certain instructions from him. One of them is that he denies that he was ever part of any assault on you.
Is it Warrant Officer Detentions?
Yes, indeed, sir. You care to comment on that?
Yeah. My statement is quite clear that he was present when I was assaulted. And even when the bigger group came, I mean, he went out and came back again. It was almost like, I don't want to be party to this bigger group operation, you know. But no, he was present. He knew I was being tortured. I complained about it, and so he can't say he doesn't know.
So further, my instructions also is that he denied that he ever used those derogative words towards you.
Well, I wish I had recording mechanism to record in the interrogation room, but you don't have that privilege. They can only do what they do and go and deny it.
Reverend, if I understand your evidence correctly, you said that there was extreme pressure from the senior officers on the interrogators to extract information.
That was my observation, my lord. They would interrogate you like Warrant Officer Detlefs. You would think you are done, they are happy about what they've done, it's finished. And then they leave you. And they come back being more violent and insulting. And you wonder what happened between the time they left you and wherever they come from. And that made me conclude that the seniors were pressurizing them. This Conrad, at one stage, they took me to him. And he said, "You have not told all the truth. And we want the truth. And they must get it from you."
Apart from that meeting with Conrad, was Conrad ever present when you were interrogated, or did he do any interrogation of you?
No, I don't remember him being there. Yeah, they didn't interrogate me directly.
And your memory is that Sifrit was a lieutenant, officer.
Who's that?
Safe.
Shepherd.
I wouldn't remember the rank. I think I remember the rank of Warrant Officer Detlefs because I spent most of the time with him. He was there most of the time. And they called him Warrant Officer Detlefs. That's how you get to know the names.
And later he assisted you with the documents with your wife as well, as you have testified.
Yeah, according to my wife.
So, in relation to the goods in your cell, do you remember whether you had more than one set of clothing in your cell?
I had the clothes that I had. But remember, at the beginning, you don't have much because they detain you, and this is all the things that you have in your hands. But after Aggett's death, we got more. Yeah, so I can't remember how much clothes there were.
I've got no further questions to
The examination?
My Lord, nothing on the examination.
How long have you known the deceased Neil Aggett prior to his death?
No, actually I do indicate that I did not know him personally. I would have heard about him, I knew. You know, there are people in the struggle during those days. We know he was part of the trade union movement, and we might have met during that time, but I can't say I had personal knowledge. And when he was detained, remember that the white comrades amongst us who were detained were very few. So their presence was noticeable.
But when you saw him on that day through the people in the corridor, how long before that he was seen in the call?
It would have been around, I would have seen him earlier, but around that time they were taking him in and out for interrogation.
Okay.
So I would have seen him a number of times through that hole. And it wasn't difficult for me to know it's Aggett because the other white comrades who were there were two others, I think. I knew them very well.
Yes.
So it wasn't difficult to say that's Aggett.
You never spoke to him when he was in detention at the same time?
No.
On the morning of the discovery of his body by the police, did any of the police officers, your handlers, inform you about it? And what did they say? What happened?
No, they didn't. As I said, it's one of the black policemen, uniform police, not the security police, who made me aware of it. And my memory serves me well. It was a uniform policeman who informed me. Because they used to share information about what's happening.
What did he say?
I won't remember the details, but he just said Aggett has died, and but I can't remember the exact words.
You never mentioned whether he died because he found himself hanging?
No, there were no details because it's a cryptid. Remember, they also are doing something they are not supposed to do. They are not supposed to talk to us.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't spend too much time.
Now, when you say that after his death, conditions changed, what actually changed? The torture changed? Are you allowed more visits, or you allowed more privileges? What actually changed?
What was dramatic for us is that they made us meet family. That to me was the dramatic thing because in terms of Section 6 of that Act, nobody would know where you are. And the family had no right, no lawyer could actually ascertain that. So that was the most dramatic, that they brought all our families to come and see us. And that's how we then got to know the details. And then I was able to do the powers of attorney, which could not happen if you were in detention. They brought us food, they brought us fresh clothes, but not much in terms of reading material, or we had no freedom actually. But the torture sort of stopped at that point, as far as it relates to myself. I don't know what they did with other people, but they were more careful, more cautious.
Now, did they allow lawyers to come and consult with you?
No, except around the time when they allowed family to talk to us. But we remained under solitary confinement. Until you are charged, a lawyer couldn't, or you are released, your lawyer couldn't interact with you.
On your statement here, you say that, I think the signed one is that, I think the signed one, in paragraph 3, you say,
the old one.
The signed statement,
Yeah.
3.1.2. In paragraph 3, you say you were detained 20th November, and you remained at John Foster until your release in 1982. You said it July. Were you again detained at any other time thereafter?
Yes, I was detained again in 1985. Yeah, for the treason trial. So that's the UDF leaders. They had two sets of leaders. They detained us first, and our trial was in Pietermaritzburg. And then the next lot ended up in Delmas trial. But that detention was really detention to go and charge us. So it didn't involve
Any torture?
yeah.
Well, thank you very much. Any questions arising out of that?
No questions, Lord.
There is one from us. If I heard you correctly, Reverend, you said that on the day when Aggett passed away, you were removed from your cells.
Yeah, there was movement.
Yes.
So I can't remember the details, but we were moved around.
Well, was it during the day or during the night when you were moved?
I don't think it would be during the night.
Yeah,
No.
that's right. That would be during the day. Early morning, afternoon, you wouldn't remember.
No, I wouldn't remember.
Thank you, ma'am.
I would imagine they removed us around because they didn't want us to be there, whatever was happening there. That's the only thing I can think of. But otherwise, it was just movement.
Yeah. Did you know the cell that Neil occupied at the time?
I did say that at that time he was on the same corridor. It would most probably be, for me it used to be cell 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, without the B's and the 1s. And I think it would have been one of those cells, 6, 7, 8, around. It was on the side.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
My Lord, we attempted to reschedule a witness for this afternoon, but unfortunately it didn't work out. So we have no further witnesses for today. We do have a witness lined up for tomorrow morning at 9:30.
And thank you very much for your information and the details that you have just in writing in the book. So maybe I submit it. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, excuse me. Very well then. It means we having an earlier break to do. I hope I did not cause it because of my earlier arrangements.
Not at all.
Okay, that's fine. With no further witnesses for today, this is an objection tomorrow. First, on the fifth, Friday.
It's a Friday.
Very good. There's no further witnesses.
All right. Give me your card. Do it now.